Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad.
And then when I found out how concerned the comedy community was for me, how much they were like, they started a GoFundMe. My friend Marina Franklin did that. And then how much they started donating, and people were really on pins and needles and cared that, whether I lived or died, that was like, wow.
In 2019, comedian Kyle Grooms suffered a seizure and had to have emergency brain surgery. The experience spawned the show Kyle Grooms' Brain Humor, which has been a hit on Amazon Video. We talk about his career journey, second chances, family, and humor amid racial turmoil. Stick around. This episode is made possible by the support of Salomon & Ludwin, a boutique wealth management firm dedicated to helping families make smart financial decisions. You worked hard and sacrificed to create and build wealth. They treat advice given to you with the respect your journey deserves. For over 30 years, Salomon & Ludwin has earned a reputation of trust and confidence, recognized by Barron's as a Hall of Fame advisor. More at salomonludwin.com. Full Disclosure podcast to NPR One, Spotify, and Apple at linkfulldradio.com. Please subscribe, rate us, and recommend Full Disclosure to others. And follow on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Full D Radio. Joining me from Miami, my hometown, is funny man Kyle Grooms, a prolific comedian, veteran comedian who in 2020 released the stand-up special that documented your ordeal with a brain tumor and a seizure called Kyle Grooms' Brain Humor. Got rave reviews on Amazon. He's been on VH1, NBC, BET, CBS, HBO. A great clip on the Chappelle Show, which you can YouTube. And his first album, The Legend of the Jersey Devil, was named one of iTunes' top 100 comedy albums of 2009. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm great, man. And after that introduction, I'm feeling even better,
Yeah, you and I met at the International Church of Cannabis, and I remarked to people seeing the uproarious set that you performed that night that I laughed so hard at your deadpan comedy, the look, the glasses, the father thing, everything, that I thought I was going to have an aneurysm, which turned to be a very fateful thing to say, because tell us what happened to you 2 years later in 2019.
Oh, yeah. I had actually was kind of like an aneurysm, but it was a brain bleed. I had a seizure out eating at a vegan restaurant, of all things, And I was with my family, and they rushed me to the hospital and found that I had a brain bleed. I had to have emergency surgery to stop it. So,
So you were with your wife. You were with your wife and kids. Were you with your wife and kids?
Oh yeah. I was with my wife and kids. My daughters, my daughters were 5 and 3 at the time, and they were freaking out about it. And I had no idea what was going on. Because I work out all the time. I'm in great health, and it just came out of nowhere. People have tumors in their brains that end up bleeding. Yeah.
So your wife is a nurse, and what did she detect? Something like a stroke, or what happened? Were you slurring your speech?
Yeah, no. What happened was we sat down to eat, and I just started shaking, like convulsing, like my right arm started to shake. And I didn't know what was going on, and I started sweating really hard. And I started to get up, and there was a big guy in the restaurant that grabbed me and sat me down. And then I just know from experience just to focus on your breathing, because if I'm breathing, I'm alive. So that's how I knew I'm alive. And I said I'll focus on my breathing. And once I did that, I was able to settle myself. And my right arm was completely numb. It was like dead. I had no use of it. And then my speech was slurring and I was sweating. And then the paramedics came. My daughters, someone gave them a cell phone, so they calmed down. And, after that, they rushed me to the hospital, and found out I had a cavernoma.
What did they rush you to Jackson?
That was the medical term for it. No, luckily they
rushed
didn't.
You to Jackson, Mount Sinai?
No, I went to Hollywood Regional in Hollywood.
By Fort Lauderdale, right.
Yeah. It was lucky because the service there was great, man. I don't know if you ever have something done, go there, man. They have the the spirit of Florence Nightingale in that place, man.
Well, you should
My
get them
wife is
to
a
you should
nurse,
get them to
and
sponsor your routine in Fort Lauderdale or something. Kyle, tell me how it felt. How was the out of body feeling of this? So your brain, you have enough oxygen and everything in your brain to realize that your body is giving out, and you're looking around and you can feel that your arms seized up, and you could feel that you want to say things but you can't. What is that feeling like?
Oh man, it's your brain is snapping like a million miles a minute, and you're trying to find answers. Like at first, I was doing a body check, like, okay, my heart's not hurting. So I knew it wasn't a heart attack. I didn't think it was a stroke because, the way I eat, I'm a vegan. I eat a plant-based diet. I work out 3 or 4 times. I didn't know what was going on. I thought I was just dying, to be honest. I was like, oh, maybe this is just it. It's like, I felt like I got hit with infinity stones, like I was just like fading away, And, then I thought about my family, and I thought about losing my ability to perform, to do stand-up, because that's my bread and butter. I don't write jokes down. They're all in my head, and and my arm was numb, so I couldn't even hold a microphone. So that's a problem too. So just my livelihood was on the line, and then.
So did they put you in an ambulance, Kyle?
Yeah. The paramedics showed up. They had Proud Boy haircuts. I made note of that, but that was okay. And then they put me in the ambulance, and I was able to walk myself to the gurney and got in. And yeah, they were real nice guys, and they took me to the hospital. And my wife followed in the car.
So Kyle, I got to ask you, so while you're in there, did you have enough presence of mind to kind of have a fear of death? Like this might have been it. If it's a stroke or something bigger, or were there any diagnostics that they could do inside the ambulance to say, hang in there, we're going to get you to the ER?
Yeah, it was happening so fast, and I took my vegan food to go, so that I was kind of confident, that it would work out. My mortality didn't really sink in for me until after I got a checkup. Then the doctor told me that they cut my head open and they had to do drill holes and all that stuff. That part freaked me out. But until then, I was just kind of numb, and I just felt vulnerable. And like, I remember my nephews came in the room, and I just started crying because, I felt helpless, really, and just hope for the best. And thinking about my daughters and growing up without me, that just, I didn't even want to I didn't even allow myself to think that yet, It ain't over till it's over. I don't know.
I got to ask a crazy question. You retained some bit of gallows humor to tell me that you made sure to take your vegan carryout with you in the ambulance. But were you kind of scouting around for comic material? Like, did you suspect, I can't write this down right now, but I really have to take note of it, make mental notes of it, because at some point, gosh, how can I not talk about this if I get out?
What is funny? It's just, I think that's just how it works. Like, my mind records things. Like, I've been in life-threatening situations a few times, and you start to record things even as they're happening. Like, the first thing, it was like, the people weren't helping. The first time my wife started screaming, no one moved. Like, the vegans just kind of sat there watching it all happen without calling 911. And they're like, someone call 911. Like, you call 911, you call 111. And then I remember thinking, had I been a baby seal or something, they probably all would have jumped, immediately. Had I been like, someone harming an animal, it's like, and then the paramedics with their haircuts, that was funny to me. Like, wow, these guys, and then we kind of looked at each other like, huh? And then, I don't know, you just record things. Like, I almost drowned in the ocean a year before that, and I started recording funny things as it was happening. You just, if I make it out of this is going to be funny. I don't know.
Kyle, tell me about what they did, and I'm still fascinated by what happened in the hospital. Did they, you imagine what's going on in the ER ward? Did they get you back up in the elevator for an MRI to open up your brain? Did they know that there was internal bleeding in the brain? How do they even diagnose for that absent kind of a PET scan or MRI?
Oh, when I got to the hospital, they knew it was, since I had a seizure. and I never had a history of seizures. They scanned my brain, and I went in the hospital on a Friday, and luckily there was a neurosurgeon in the hospital on that Friday. So that was lucky, because normally they go home. They did an MRI and a CAT scan where they just shoot me up with dye, and they put me in a machine, and then it scans my whole body, and it sees what, and then it could read the bleed. It saw that it had a cavernoma. It's a group of cells that form a tumor if somehow they started bleeding. And it showed up on the screen.
So this was a benign tumor, a growth in your gray matter in your brain.
A group of cells that come together and form a little lump, I guess, and then whatever that was, it started to bleed. And the reason it started bleeding, we have no idea.
So let me ask, were you worried about, how did they know immediately that it wasn't a terminal cancer or something like a glioblastoma, or, what John McCain and Ted Kennedy suffered? How did they, did they have to biopsy it? I'm sorry to get into detail, but I think brain tumor, that's a pretty dire.
Yeah, they biopsy it, and then they checked it out, and then it came back to be benign. So yeah, they had to send it out to be biopsied. They tested it.
Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad. We're talking to Kyle Grooms, a funny man who once made me laugh so hard when I saw his act in Denver in 2017 that I thought I was going to have an aneurysm. It turns out he went off in 2019 and had a brain hemorrhage and a seizure, which led to emergency brain surgery. But ever the comedian and a spectator of life, he released in 2020 a stand-up special that documented his ordeal, Kyle Grooms' Brain Humor, which can be streamed on Amazon Video. Take me to the way back, Kyle. I always was interested in your story, your childhood, where you started off. I know it's a lot of back and forth between New Jersey and Miami. When did you find your voice? When did you know that you had a living as a nationally touring comedian?
Well, it was probably I was working at Univision at the time. I was an art director, and I started doing stand-up at night just as a hobby. And I did a show in, I believe it was Boca, maybe at a Boca country club, my third time in. And I did a joke, and I think it was about the color purple and how blacks are portrayed on television. And it just went over so well that I was like, wow. And that's when the bug hit me. And it just became something I pursued more than as a hobby. But then once I started focusing on that more and less on my art director's job, I knew it was time to switch to stand-up. And once I could feed myself doing stand-up, I said, it's time to go.
So pick it apart for me. Univision right out of college, or you were there as an art director out of design school in your 20s, and you decided you had this itch?
Yeah, I used to be a graffiti artist in New Jersey and throughout high school. That just drove me artistically. Yeah, artistically, I was a graffiti artist. I used to spray paint on, on bridges and tunnels, all kinds of stuff, and jackets. And I got into graphic arts. So then I came to the Art Institute of Fort Lauderdale for art school because, you didn't have to take a SAT. It was sunny. So, hey, I'm going to Miami. And then after that, I got an internship at WTVJ in Miami, which led to me moving around.
I know it well.
When it was on Miami, when it was in downtown Miami, and
right.
Then I worked, thinking freelance at WSVN. Then I worked at PBS in Miami. Then I worked at
hold up. You worked at the Newsplex?
Yeah, at PBS in North Miami Beach. Yeah, I used to love it because
no, the Newsplex, the WSVN.
Oh, the SVN.
WSVN,
oh yeah. I worked at the Newsplex on the Causeway. Yeah. I've worked there.
That's supposed to be plenty of comedy material there just alone. Could you tell us about the first gig, how you found out about it? So what gets you from the art director scene in kind of Miami, Fort Lauderdale to playing a country club in Boca? Talk about a man out of place. Did you just say what happens in Boca will stay in Boca? If I go up there and it bombs, it's never going to follow me back to the 305?
Hey, now, when I first started comedy, I would take a gig wherever I could get it. If you say it's in Boca, it's in Boca. If it's in, Ghouls, it's in Ghouls. A Homestead, I'm everywhere. Bell Glades. It doesn't matter.
Centra Village, Cemetery Village. You got to tell me about that, though. You showed up, your very first gig. Timestamp it for me. Roughly when was it?
Oh, my very first gig, I was, to be honest, was in New Jersey. It was at a hair show for my ex-girlfriend, who she worked at a hair salon, and they had like a hair show. And I said, hey, I could do stand-up. And then I went up and killed for 15 minutes, you know? And it was mostly Hispanic crowd.
At a hair salon?
Yeah, it was a hair show. Yeah, it was a group of people. Like the hair salon had a hair show. It's kind of like a fashion show, but with hair. And then on top of that, they have like.
Did you get paid for it? Did they give you a sandwich or fish and chips or anything?
Yeah, I got like a free soda, like a lunch, some pollo guisado. I think I got a Dominican meal. I think I got a good Dominican meal out of it. Yeah. Some rice and beans.
Take me to the Boca thing. You said, well, we've had comics on and comedians on. We've always asked them what the inception point is. So I guess you were driving back from Boca that night after you barnstormed, I don't know, whatever it was, Boca West, or let's say the country club. And you said, you know what? I think I could make a living out of this.
Yeah,
because did you have that realization, that epiphany?
Yeah. Because if I could connect with these people, with the material that I just did, this is what I want to do. That it just felt so good, and I got to express myself. Wasn't offensive, and it was like, it was dope. That's when I got the tickle. I got the bug, you say, to do stand up forever.
Kyle, what about anxiety? What about the notorious dead time and anxiety, like the nightmares, the cold sweats that a comic wakes up with when nobody laughs and you could hear the click and clack of the glasses?
Yeah, my anxiety, where I started, like I actually started in Studio 183. I don't know if you know, it's in Carroll City. There used to be a flea market in Miami, Studio 183 flea market.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I really began. Like, that's where I say I got my comedy chops, because it was like a urban room. They say, it was an urban room. Everybody from like middle class, upper class, lower class, drug dealers, doctors, NFL players, the whole mix of the black community was there. Gold teeth, no gold teeth. It was the hood basically, and that's where I started comedy, Studio 183. And coming from like working as an art director, I would go there dressed kind of like conservative, Banana Republic, Abercrombie and Fitch, that type of style. I had to work hard to overcome just the way I looked, and with glasses too. So yeah, I paved the way for black nerds.
You paved the way. You, as you say in your act, you and Steve Urkel, but you're not Urkel. Yeah. You could be a very menacing Urkel. But tell me about your big break. When did the big guys come knocking? When was it outside a kind of provincial I-95, 305, 954, 561 to getting called up to New York and L.A.?
I did, Def Jam, I did my second year in stand-up. My second year doing 97. I started in 95. I did Def Comedy Jam in 97. But it wasn't a big break. It was just like, oh, I can still do this. I was still actually working at Univision. I had to take vacation days to go shoot Def Comedy Jam. But I think in 2001, Jamie Foxx used to have a comedy festival in Atlanta called Laughapalooza. And that's when I met a New York manager, and they were like, hey, you need to come to New York and hone your craft. And, that's when I was like, okay. So I left Miami and went to New York, and that's when I learned really how to be a stand-up, because you got to see Jim Norton, Patrice O'Neill's, Greg Giraldo, all these guys perform. Colin Quinn, Chris Rock would come through, Dave Chappelle. So it was the mecca of stand-up. And I had to get rid of all my hacky Miami comedy and learn to be a real stand-up comedian,
Kyle, how did you make ends meet when you moved to New York?
Well, I made ends meet by moving back into my mama's basement. My mother lives in Perth Amboy, New Jersey still. So for the first year or two, I stayed with her. And I booked gigs. I was off and running my first year in New York. You could book enough local gigs, enough college gigs. Then I started getting TV sets and getting TV exposure. And once I got on the Chappelle show, maybe my second year in New York, maybe my first year in New York. And moving to New York, you work every day. You could be on stage every night. I think I was on stage every night in New York.
Kyle Grooms, tell me about the Chappelle show. I'm dying to know what it was like to get the call up because, that thing is it's a cultural totem. I think it debuted, what was it, in 2003? Early 2003, and the stuff is just quoted left and right. I mean, Charlie Murphy, the late Charlie Murphy, the late Rick James. I mean, this stuff is he's a legend, and it's amazing that it's already almost 2 decades ago. But tell me where you were when you got that call, and what they said, and how excited you were, and where they took you out to, and what the whole process and the feedback was like.
It's funny. The way I got the Chappelle show, Neil Brennan was working at the Boston Comedy Club in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan. And I didn't know who he was. I just thought he was a new comic just trying to work out some material, And I was like, yo, man, you funny. You should hang in there, keep it up. Your stuff is tight. You doing well. You got it. And he was like, oh, yeah, I write with Chappelle. I'm his writing partner and the co-creator of Chappelle Show. And, then that's how I got on that. And I knew Dave, but I didn't, I know him, but not like that, just in passing. And I've done a few shows with him. And then they invited me to come in and do some sketches with Dave. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And then they asked me to come and write on the show, start writing, submitting stuff. And then that's when Dave left. He left that week. We were actually shooting the last sketch. I think I was in the last few sketches before he left.
You cross paths with Ashy Larry and Charlie Murphy and all these various people who went off to have amazing careers after Chappelle?
Yeah, well, I knew Donnell, Ashy Larry, before Chappelle show. Me and him, we was on the urban comedy scene together. Charlie Murphy, I just knew from TV, but I met Charlie once I signed on to, I started going to the set, and then I was doing the I'm Rich tour. It was Donnell, Charlie, Bill Burr, and myself. And then Bill started getting his own thing. So then it was me and Donnell and Charlie. And then it was down to me and Charlie. And then Charlie went on and became a better comedian and went on his own and started having people open for him. But we all kind of know those guys. I already kind of knew those guys before Chappelle's show.
Yeah, isn't it amazing to look back now and you can't think of Prince without thinking about the Chappelle skit with the basketball and the pancakes. You can't think of Rick James, rest in peace. You can't think of him without that infamous I'm Rick James B skit. You can't think of, a lot of people think about Charlie Murphy more than they do Eddie Murphy because it was so, it was a risky bet that this guy, so the backstory is that this guy had such long tails, like ridiculous Hollywood tall tales, that he's like, why don't you tell him and we can reenact them? And that then kind of became the genesis. If you watch Drunk History and a bunch of other programs, it's second nature today, but it was definitely a creative risk. Like you could imagine it getting left on the cutting room floor back in 2004, 2005.
Oh yeah. And it was a brilliant idea because Charlie is a amazing storyteller and I love hearing his stories. He's like, I miss him still to this day. It was recently he passed. It was the anniversary of his death. And yeah, Charlie's an amazing storyteller. Like the world didn't even get to see how funny Charlie is, man. Well, they did, but they didn't, I'm learning a lot being a father, man. I didn't know girl babies learn to speak before boy babies. Like when I'm in a playground, my daughters are speaking complete sentences and the boys are walking around like, bumping their heads on the swing, licking the seesaw. And my daughter's like, Father, this child is peculiar. Can we go home now, Daddy? I want to watch Bubble Guppies. My daughters, man, they something. They daddy me to death, too. Daddy, 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 which feels good, man. It really feels good to have somebody call me daddy, and I'm really their father.
Full disclosure, stay with us. This show podcast to NPR One, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts at link fulldradio.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at fulldradio and DM me. Get into my DMs if you'd like to get in touch and carry it on your air. If you're just joining us, we are talking to Kyle Grooms, a veteran funny man who I met at the International Church of Cannabis back in 2017. Unbelievably, as I kept up with him, and his stuff is hilarious, he went back and in 2019 had a seizure, which led to emergency brain surgery, and the stuff was processed. Thank God he came out of it, and the benign growth was taken out of his brain. But you could see Kyle Grooms' brain humor on Amazon Video. Tell me what it was like adapting that experience and being, I've seen this stuff on YouTube, Kyle. You're both vulnerable and paternal and grateful to your wife for taking care of you, but you're also cracking ridiculous things. Like you're saying, now I can be sure that these are my kids.
Oh, no, I had to keep humor, man. It's just part of what I do. If something bad happens, that's part of what it is, right? Richard Pryor made fun of him setting fire. You got to say something, I can't just go on, and you know what it is. It's part of the art form,
So if anybody goes on YouTube or your various social media channels, they can see the stitches on your cranium. They can see you in the hospital. They can see you using an articulated spoon to eat applesauce while your wife cheers you on. When did it occur to you to kind of get all this down on camera and radio, just to have it documented?
Yeah, the director, Dean Alexander, it was his idea. He's a young, hungry photographer, and he said, "Hey, we should document this." And I was like, "What? I got stitches in my head, bro." And then I allowed him to do it, and I said, then I decided I wanted to do a special anyway. I said, "Yeah, I should probably document this and make a special out of it." And I couldn't drive for 6 months, so I couldn't go to spots. From September to January when I shot it, I had to put together a set, an hour set, chopped it down to a half hour, and then chopped it down to 15 minutes with some other stuff, and it worked out. It worked out well.
Kyle, how involved was your brain surgery? They took out a benign growth, but there's a significant thing. I mean, they have to drill into the hard bone, and then there's the layer, there's the kind of the flap underneath it, and then to go in and take out the neoplasm or whatever it is. How long was that surgery? How involved was it? What was the risk of you losing verbal or motor skills?
Well, my doctor explained to me that he didn't go in depth really until after my checkup, but he was saying he had to do like drill holes to just like to score it, and then he had to cut along it. He just said he had to do pre-drill holes. That freaked me out already. And then they had to saw it open and split it. It was I don't know I really don't know, but yeah, what the whole thing was. But just that they had to open me up anytime, and if they touch your brain, it was my left frontal lobe. So that controls my creativity and everything. So
what did it feel like? What did it look like when you woke up, when you ccame to? What did it feel like?
Oh, you know what, to be honest, they put me to sleep on propofol, so it like when I woke up, that stuff's amazing. I didn't feel a thing, man. I woke up, and when you're in the hospital, they ask you like, who's the president? When's your birthday? What day is it? What do you know the date? Do you know where you are? And I do remember the first question they asked me was, what year is it? And I said 1969. Which is ironic because that's my birthday, but I just got it wrong. But to me, it felt like I was born again, on that day. That's my birthday, I know it's 2019, wow. But it feels like my birthday again,
I saw on your video that you lost it. You lost it when your nephews came. You said you lost it, and that was kind of a moment where you briefly lost control and you gave in to the crying. and you realized how loved you were universally.
Yeah.
I mean, the beautiful things you say about your wife,
Yeah.
how she took care of you, how the kids
Yeah.
rallied, just
And
the
then,
nephews coming into the ER. I mean, talk to me about that.
yeah, just seeing my nephews, because, you want to be strong not that you want to be strong, but it's like just to be in that position. Now you're vulnerable, like you're humbled. It's like there's nothing you can do now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no matter how much you take care of yourself, you work out, you exercise, it's like, boom. I never thought I would be in a hospital bed like that, And then when I found out how concerned the comedy community was for me, how much they were like, they started a GoFundMe. My friend Marina Franklin did that. And then how much they started donating, and people were really on pins and needles and cared that, whether I lived or died, that was like, wow. I felt like I got my flowers ahead of time. A lot of comedians pass and then we all post pictures and post, stuff about them on social media. But me, I feel like I got to see the love before, like, whoa, wow, okay. That moved me. That humbled me. It almost embarrassed me. Like, wow,
Kyle, tell me about the recovery process and rehabilitation and, occupational therapy, speech therapy.
Well, once I was in the hospital, they were giving me therapy. But then once I left the hospital and they cleaned up the mess that was in my head, they mopped it up and everything and closed it up, I actually, to be honest, really started to just rejuvenate on its own. They put me on Keppra, which is an anti-seizure medication, and it's to help with the healing and stuff. And since then, I had two MRIs. One was delayed because of the COVID, but I just recently got it, and I got a clean slate. It was a good checkup. Everything seems to be normal. And yeah, and by the grace of God, I haven't really had any therapy, nothing. My comedy, my wit is returning. I remember all my material, remember my childhood. I remember everything, And I'm just lucky. I dodged a bullet. I've heard of people having the same thing, but in another part of their brain that they can't get to. I've heard people losing half their brain. All kinds of stories about people with their brains since this happened to me. Like, people inbox me about stuff. Yeah, I'm just so lucky for
you. Didn't. So here's the thing: you didn't want to get your revenge against vegan food and have a big old steak.
No, because I kind of contribute my plant-based lifestyle to my fast recovery. How about that? Yeah, it just helped me regenerate my cells.
Full disclosure, I'm Robin Farzad. You're listening to comedian Kyle Grooms. He's appeared on VH1, NBC, The Chappelle Show. He appeared in with Amy Schumer in the film I Feel Pretty, as well as a half-hour special on Comedy Central. So as I like to quote, you're a young guy, but I like to say you're definitely internationally known and known to rock a microphone. What does that feel like? You're not out there looking for art director gigs or graphic design gigs, that you are a man in demand.
Oh man, this feels great. Once somebody said that I was a journeyman, and I was like, no, I'm not a journeyman. But then I sat back and I was like, it's kind of good to be a journeyman, because then that means you're on a journey, and hopefully you'll always be fed and eating, and I'm still doing what I love, and 25 years later. Well, I quit my day job in 2000. So, and 21 years later, I'm still going.
I have to ask you about what you thought of Dave Chappelle's monologue on George Floyd. It was done outdoors in the throes of the pandemic, 8:46, which is the haunting time that, this unarmed African-American male, now it's a infamous and famous character in history, almost a martyr, was effectively murdered. I mean, it wasn't just funny stuff. It's really venturing into a territory that you had to wonder, where is there room for traditional comedy last year? This had to be especially scathing.
Yeah.
It was a really angry meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. When I watch Dave, it almost resets my focus, because that's what comedy is supposed to kind of be, like that Like for me, that's how I love it like that. That it was so organic. And people say it really wasn't funny, but it was kind of thought provoking. And then you kind of fill in if you know funny, you could fill in the blanks. You get what I'm saying? And sometimes it's funny, not ha ha funny, but funny and ha, that's funny. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, but Dave is, just to watch him work, it don't have to be yuck, yuck, hoo, 10 jokes or, whatever jokes per minute, laugh per minute. And he could always be funny. He could always throw in a, banana peel somewhere. But, you that's possible. But he's like a Jedi, bro. He ain't got to do all that work.
I'm quoting from the Vox profile, the Vox write-up of Chappelle's 846 in 2020 during the throes of the pandemic and in the wake of the George Floyd protests across the country. I'm quoting here, drawing a comparison to the terror Chappelle felt during the 1994 Northridge earthquake, he points out that despite his fear and panic and the conviction that he was going to die, the earthquake only lasted less than 30 seconds in total. I'm quoting Chappelle, this man kneeled on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you imagine that?
It's what it is, man. And the comics ain't really saying it like that. So direct.
Well, Kyle, I think back to, I'm going to go back to the Chappelle show where he left. He thought that there was a certain laugh or cackle that he didn't appreciate, that he couldn't do social commentary without being caricatured. And the country missed him. Mm-hmm. And there was a long silence, a couple of abortive comebacks and everything. But this was a true, exclamation coming back that I don't have to be a caricature, that I'm not here to assuage you or to provide escapism. This is how it is in its raw, real truth.
You don't have to play Zip Coon. That's what I say. You don't play Zip Coon, Yeah, I could see that. And I could see him leaving, too. I actually still have that script. I was in that sketch that made him uncomfortable that he left. And
Was that the airplane? Sketch with the
script title is called Pixie. That's what it says on the script. It was literally called Pixie.
And he just said that in the table read, the way one of the other writers laughed, he realized that this isn't something he wanted to continue doing.
Yeah, I could see that. Because comics have a sense of humor that sometimes we good for it, and especially back in the 1900s. You know what I mean? That we're good with it, but is it socially responsible? And now a lot of the stuff that was cool for us to do now, we seeing how it plays out in society. Like people don't get the joke. They just get the caricature. They're not nuanced enough or sophisticated enough to know that, this is what he's doing is actually parodying what some of us do. But then they lump it. It's just a weird trick bag for me. I think when you're doing stuff like that.
Kyle Grooms, in closing, in the few minutes we have left with you, sometimes I call this open skate, like free skate back at the roller skating rinks in the 1980s where the DJ's like, couples, everybody, just come on, come on. We're going to play Air Supply.
Free skate.
Or Lionel Richie. But I'm actually, before we even get into that, I have to ask you, there is a convergence of your design skills now with what is expected of a comedian kind of in the pandemic streaming from home environment. There are people who've made names for themselves on Twitter and Instagram doing monologues. You saw the woman who made a living impersonating Donald Trump. You see Kylie Brakeman and others. I was amazed when I saw you post this montage of Scarface with Tony Montana laughing, with the Brazilian drug dealer laughing, with you putting yourself in there. And it's like, take it to the limit. I mean, that it is up the game and the demands of a comedian right now. You kind of have to be out there as your own producer, marketing person, hustling on social media. Talk to us about that.
Oh, yeah, it definitely opened it up, and it exposed a lot of people, their work ethic, too. And it's a catch-22 because you want to be a great stand-up, and that's where we bring people out and people come see us. But then there's a whole new market of, the internet. And then now there's going to do a Bitcoin is going to have a platform. So these platforms keep developing that, I rejected doing stand up online at first But then I made like a few $100 in my living room, and didn't have to go anywhere, and was like, oh, and then it wasn't that bad. It was just like talking to my camera, something. If I were a talk show host or something, that's what I'd be doing. So now I could do it from your living room.
Are you itching to get back up on a stage in front of an audience?
Oh no, I'm in Miami, so I've been on stage since June. Florida don't care, man. These people, they're like, yeah, I've been performing since, and plus now I started doing my own Thursday night in Miami at the Urban. It's a new place in historic Overtown. It's being revitalized with Black businesses and like the Red Rooster and the Urban. And we have a comedy night called Laugh Lounge Miami that I do every Thursday.
I got to ask you, while I have you, what do you think about the international attention suddenly on Miami? Everybody's saying it's a new New York. A lot of people quarantined there. A lot of the restaurants coming there. A lot of tech bro and Bitcoin bro money.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a Bitcoin, the mecca for Bitcoin. That's what they're trying to do. But they've always said Miami, since the 80s, they've said Miami's going to be the next Hollywood. That's always have been the rumor. Then they start shooting a few productions here, and then it doesn't. But I think now, because of the pandemic, New York showed a little weakness. You know what I mean? They got exposed a little bit. And then it's like, why live in that kind of clutter when you could have sunshine? And I think if people return to nature, they're going to want to move out of the cities, Miami's kind of chill. It's metropolitan, and it's close enough to New York, a 2-hour flight. So there you go.
Kyle Grooms, close us out at the few minutes we have left with you. Lessons learned, stuff you want your kids to know about this experience, humility, health, all these things coming out of this really surreal experience that you had. Again, in 2017, you were really on the fast lane. I mean, you were really painfully funny. And it broke my heart to see that you had this turmoil in 2019 ahead of a year of pandemic and racial unrest and everything. It's a lot to kind of emerge from in terms of business as usual.
Yeah. To be honest, all the stuff that's been happening in 2020, 2021, I'm really grateful to be here just to witness it. To be honest, I want to be here when the Martians land. I want to see what they're like as well, and it just showed me that it could be taken from you to be humble. It could be taken from you at any moment. You never know what'll happen to you in life. So, let go and let God, to be honest. That's what I learned in the last few years. And my daughters were there, and they experienced it too. So, and I think they became stronger and wiser because of it, because they saw their father almost go down, So, take care of yourselves, everybody. When we come out of this quarantine, hopefully we'll all be better. I don't know. I doubt it, but I thought once we had the quarantine, people would sit back and be like, oh, we appreciate nature and we'll sit back and have a breather. But nah, it just exposed a lot.
Kyle Grooms, I am so grateful that you've shared this candor with us. I'm going to leave our listeners with a couple minutes of your comedy routine, Brain Humor stand-up special. Tell us your digits and everything, where you could be found, what your plans are for the balance of 2021.
Yeah, Kyle at kylegrooms.com. That's my website. At Kyle Grooms on Instagram, and Laugh Lounge Miami if you're in Miami on a Thursday night and want to have a good time. LaughLoungeMiami.com. That's about it. Kyle Grooms. See you on stage.
Brainy, funny man Kyle Grooms. I'm going to leave you with some of his 2020 stand-up special. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks for having me, man. It's pleasure doing this, man. This has been a really humbling experience for me, man. I thank God that I'm alive, I can still be here for my family, my wife, my kids. Man, and the love and support that I got from my comedy family, my friends, it's just overwhelming. I feel like I need to make something out of myself now. But for now, I'm just gonna continue to do what I do what I love. That's stand-up comedy, traveling the world and making people laugh. Yeah, I got out of the hospital, man. I was religious for like 2 weeks. I'd wake up every morning with my Pandora on the gospel station. Just another day, my Lord has kept me here. Yes, it did. Just another day that I've been in my Savior's care. I want to say He threw his loving arms all around me. Yes, He did. And there I found peace and joy in there. Oh, thank you. Some of y'all appreciate it. Some of y'all like, karaoke night is next week.
Full disclosure, special thanks on this episode to Claire Morgan of Notterly. This show podcasts to NPR One, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts at link fulldradio.com. Please rate us, please subscribe, please recommend us to others. Additionally, we are available over the air in Northern Virginia, D.C., Asheville, North Carolina, Ventura, California. Holler if you would like us on your air. I'm Robin Farzad. Thank you for listening. Back with you next week.